Are you ready for smooth sailing with your social media management tool? Say goodbye to your security worries and those pesky charges when you have to add a new team member and say hello to Sked Social. With Sked Social, you get unlimited seats, so you can add as many people as you want. Whoever needs to be added can get added in, and you're not sharing passwords, which is not safe. And you're not being charged extra every time you need to add someone in. So not only are you managing your social media in one easy-to-use dashboard, you're also keeping everyone on the same page. Plus, the flexible pricing allows you to scale up and grow as you need to. No surprises, just smart social media management. Click the link in the show notes to get started with Sked Social today. Oh, they say curiosity killed the cat. But in this episode, we're diving into how curiosity can spark your content and your marketing conversations. I have the amazing Emily Aborn on the show to dive into all things curiosity. Stay tuned because we're going to go deep. Welcome to the Mindful Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Jones. Tune in every week as we redefine marketing playbooks to break free from what we should do so that we can scroll less, connect more, and grow together. I've recorded over 300 podcast episodes. Yeah, it's a lot of podcast episodes, and I've tried a lot of different virtual recording studios, but my favorite has been Riverside. Riverside makes their virtual recording studio look so profesh. My guests love it. Plus, I also low-key love recording YouTube videos in here as well because it's so easy to use. My team also loves Riverside because it spits out separate audio video tracks, making editing easy breezy, lemon squeezy. And if you want a little magic, they've got this tool called Magic Clips, which uses AI to take your video and turn it into perfect social media sized videos. I'm talking vertical videos for TikTok and Instagram, Facebook Reels, all the places you can post these videos with the captions included, and you don't have to hunt and search for that perfect clip. So if you want to try this out for yourself, click the link that goes with this video, or if you're listening to the audio on the podcast, it's in the show notes, okay? Click that link, use the 15% off coupon code. It's DREA, D-R-E-A, and try Riverside for yourself. Thank you, Riverside. Emily, I'm so excited to chat with you today because obviously I was on your podcast. When we had our conversation and we talked about you coming on my podcast, and then I saw your write-up about curiosity and I was like, oh, we've never gone here on the show. So I'm excited to just go deep with you. But let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into this marketing world? What's your origin story?
Okay, I will keep this very brief and concise, but in a nutshell, I feel like I've kind of been doing this my whole life, really my whole life. So the way that I officially got into marketing is that I had a retail shop locally with my husband, and we sold all natural bedding and organic mattresses and non-toxic home products, basically. And I quickly learned that the retail situation was not for me, but I loved doing all of the elements of my business that were related to marketing. Loved it. So much so that other people would comment on my marketing and ask me to do their marketing for them. So I kind of built my business as I was transitioning out of my other business. I literally was running two things at the same time. And then it was just kind of a slow process of niching down and discovering what I really wanted to be doing was not scheduling people's social media posts. It was really the writing piece. So now I'm fortunate, and that was a big, scary way to kind of niche my business down. I was like, well, is anybody going to want just the writing piece? And so it took me honestly 4 years to get to that point. And when I made that shift and that transition, my business blew up more than ever. So now I focus specifically on copywriting and content marketing. And it's just always been a part of me. I think marketing is really how to have a conversation with somebody.
Yes.
And so I've always loved, I was the kid that walked around with a tape recorder, recording people's stories on my tape recorder and writing their stories and publishing them in my own little newspaper. So it's really just been something I've done, and I fall into it at every single job I've ever worked. And then finally one day I was like, oh, the writing's been on the wall the whole time.
Okay, you just like unlocked a memory for me because I remember my siblings and I recording ourselves on a tape recorder and then like playing it back and then redoing our stories to like make them more interesting. And it's so funny how like I totally forgot how that was a thing and then you brought it up. But that's where the creativity comes from, right? It's like marketing is relationships, I think is what you said. And I totally agree with this piece. It's not about trying to push something on someone. It's about having a conversation and helping them in some way. And it sounds like that's what you started off doing. You just wanted to help the community around you, which is such a beautiful thing. I love it.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I agree. It's 100% or not 100%, but it is so much just relationship building and not what we've made it to be, which is just, we think of marketing as digital marketing, right? But it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. Okay. So why curiosity marketing? Like what is that? Define it for us?
Okay. So the way I got into it was I was focusing on a specific SEO topic every single month for 9 months. And I think you know my friend, Erin Alilla. She's of the Talk Copy to Me podcast. She's lovely.
Love
so
Erin.
I was taking an SEO course with her. And one of the assignments was we had to focus on particular keywords like each month. So one of the ones I chose, and I don't even really know why, was curiosity marketing. And once I started learning about curiosity and the role that it plays in our marketing, I was just like more and more and more curious, right? So I kept sort of following that, having different conversations around it. And I realized that there's so much we can be doing in our marketing that like curiosity is a force within us. It is what pulled the cat probably into the road, right? But it's basically like this force within us that leads us to either learn about somebody else or to solve a problem that we might be having, or maybe to just learn something entirely new, right? It is kind of like this like tug. And so we as marketers, as business owners, we can kind of like create that tug for people to bring, it's like an invitation. Like, is this interesting to you? And then bringing them into whatever we're doing. So that's sort of how I came across it. It was by accident. And I just became very, very curious in it. And I had months of content just focused on curiosity because of like how big of a topic it really, really is and how valuable it is for us as business owners.
There's something so meta about the curiosity of curiosity marketing. I love it. I think that the like leaning into curiosity is such a powerful marketing strategy anyways. And then learning more about it in the work that you do. Like I'm excited to dive on in. So I know that there are 4 types of curious people. Tell us about the 4 types.
Okay, so you're going to love this. And you can use this as a marketer to kind of think also about what type of curious people are usually the ones following you or usually the ones working with you, okay? So I did not make these up, by the way. They come from like a quiz that ranks you on different things. So the first one is the fascinated. And this is like the person that they really are interested in a wide array of topics. It's like the person that loves bird watching, but also loves Greek mythology, but also loves learning about World War II. Like it's just a huge array of topics that capture their interest and they want to learn about everything that they possibly can. And it's also kind of just like a joy in learning. Like it might not actually have any sort of point other than just to learn. Then there's the empathizer. And this is like the very socially curious person. This is the person that wants to know what makes other people tick. And why did you say something the way that you said something? And what do you mean when you like to lose at Wordle? Like, what does it mean when you say that you enjoy losing in that game? What is behind that? So this is just like a person that loves to learn about people and the people, specifically, I would say the people around them, but just people in general and personalities and such. And then there is the problem solver. And this is when you're like, I mean, it speaks for itself, right? But it's like you're pondering, you're trying to find solutions to problems. Maybe you love turning things over and finding like ways around that nobody else did, right? So you're more curious on specific things, like how do I get from A to Z? And then this is technically not a form of curiosity, but it's the avoider. And likely, I always say, like, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not an avoider. They're just not really that curious. And we all know people like this in our life, right? The people that just like, they don't ask you questions. They don't really care about like other ways to solve their problems. They're not really interested in what kind of woodpecker you just saw outside. Like, they're just low curiosity overall. So those are the 4 types. And it's helpful for you as a content creator to think about like, ooh, what type of people what type do I like to speak? Like, which language do I like to speak? And also what type of people are kind of like paying attention to what I'm sharing.
Ooh, fascinating. I'm already like categorizing myself and my husband in my brain. Like, I think I'm a problem solver. My Google search is always very specific. Like, I have such a specific problem and I need a specific answer. And I think my husband is more of like the fascinator. Like, I think that's the fascination, the first one, where he just likes to know, but he doesn't necessarily go on a hunt to know things. He just like whatever's around him, he just wants to know about it. Anyways, I'm fascinated by these 4 types of curious people. I'll have to think more about who I'm attracted to, but this has definitely got my wheels turning on how to use more curiosity marketing. But when we think about like curiosity, how do we get people from like, oh, this is interesting information towards like, I want to give you money for the thing that you're selling?
Yeah, like that's what we all want, right? We want to stand out from all of this noise and get the 2 seconds that it takes to capture their attention. Or I think it's like 1 second now. But so the first one is something I know that I've heard you say too. And it's just like, know who you're talking to. Like, get really clear on what you're saying and also who you're saying it to, because the more specific we can be, like the more eerily specific you can be with things, the more it tends to land and get people to say like, oh my gosh, they're talking about me. And then they have to like lean in and take that next step, right? Yeah. So that's the first one. It's just like, ask yourself who you're talking to. And I mean, that's goes for any marketing. That's just good, solid marketing advice. The second one, and this is like a little harder, and you might actually need to pull in like a business bestie or, someone who can be really, really honest and straightforward with you. But it's asking yourself, would I follow me? And I think, so as a podcaster, and I think I'm weird in this, but I will often go back and listen to my interviews with people, or I'll listen to like specific episodes, because I want to make sure that I'm not just like all over the place, rambly road. Like, it has to be interesting. Yeah. And you do sometimes have to be really, really honest with yourself or ask for feedback from somebody. But asking, you can like do like a little monthly audit of yourself, right? Like, am I interesting? Would I want to follow me? So those are like 2 starting points. And then like, let's talk about some actual tangible once we have the answers to those questions. So one I love is just like, I'm going to call them, well, hooks for lack of a better word, but it could be anything that just kind of like pulls people in, right? So starting with a question. You see some people do like unpopular opinions, but sharing your opinion, I would say, in general. And then including elements of surprise. Like, I love surprising people. They have this image of me in their head of like what kind of person I am and what kind of things I do and don't do. And so if I can disrupt that and catch them by surprise, that's a good way to also create curiosity, right? So you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what is she doing now? That is not like Emily. The other one I love is like, you in this vein is like using puns or humor, like whatever is unique to your personality, right? So just keeping it like content creation can actually be fun and light, and that's a great way to create curiosity, because people they're naturally interested in things that make them feel good. So those are kind of like the ways to use hooks. I would also say like keeping things really concise and not overly detailed. So I work with a lot of interior designers. I have this interesting niche in the interior design and home trades world, and they want to tell you every detail about their process. Like, they want to tell you every single piece of the process, from onboarding to curation of the marble to install of the marble. And we just cannot get that in the weeds for people at the point that we're trying to capture their attention, right? Like, once they're already our clients, Trust me, I love some details. But at the beginning, I don't need to tell them every single step that is going to happen. I want to be more concise and focus on like what they're going to feel on the other side. So like, why does this even matter to them? What's the benefit to them? Not here's every single feature of what I'm offering or what I'm doing. So I think those are some good initial ones. And I always say like, all caps does not equal curiosity. All emojis is not curiosity, right? Like, let's be more creative than that. I think, maybe writing things ourselves and creating things ourselves rather than having like ChatGPT write all of our content. ChatGPT isn't a human, so it doesn't have that natural pull, that natural drive. So it doesn't actually really even know what makes people curious and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And then this is just where I would like always come back to is keeping the focus on the person that you're speaking to. So whether that be a specific niche, whether that be a specific problem that they're facing, ask yourself why it matters to them and focus on that. And like, I love speaking or writing like I'm talking to just one person on the other side, because that's how people feel most seen in our content when we are speaking to them directly. So I have some don'ts, but I'm going to pause there and let you, because I'm like, I can tell you're excited and have ideas.
I know. I have so many follow-up questions. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I have all the questions when we get back. Do you feel like you're in a love-hate relationship with Instagram? Well, I totally feel you. With all of the new features and updates and algorithm changes, it can feel like a lot to keep up with everything. That's why I'm excited to host the Instagram Bootcamp live this August 19th through the 22nd. Come and join me if you're ready to find your rhythm with Instagram again. I want to help you create content that works in tandem with the Instagram algorithm, not against it. So get ready to build some organic connections and reignite your passion for creating content again. If you're ready to fall back in love with Instagram, join me for the Instagram Bootcamp Live starting August 19th. I'll see you there. And we are back. So Emily, follow-up question, because you just gave us so much good information and I'm loving every piece of it. But one of the things that comes up in my mind is, for those people who are just starting out, how do we know what's going to spark curiosity? Like, how do we know where to start when it comes to curiosity marketing? I know probably a lot of it is testing, but sometimes that very first kind of foyer into curiosity marketing, if we've been, over delivering with all of these ideas and content before, how do we narrow it down into something so specific that the other person's like, oh, you know exactly what I'm thinking. You're inside my brain. Okay.
You said something at the beginning, actually, that I think fits really perfectly here. And that is following your own curiosity as a content creator. Like, when we infuse our own excitement for what we're talking about, you can't help but make other people around you excited. I mean, that is why when I started following that vein of curiosity marketing at the beginning, that was just me being curious. And I cannot tell you how many people hear about that topic and they're like, oh my gosh, what is that? Like, then they want to know about it. So I think that's what I would say is be curious as a content creator, try different things, like when I was niching my business down, I definitely had to go through a lot of painful experiences of figuring out what I like and what I don't like, who I like working with and who I don't like working with, and why, what I like doing and not. So I think the same relates to creating content. And I do think, as much as it's like painful, I think we throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall at first to find out what sticks. But I would say on that is like, make sure you're also giving something enough time to see if it sticks, right? So don't just like try it once. Oh, that didn't work. Try it another time. Oh, that didn't work. Try something else. That didn't work. Give it enough time and consistency to really test something and see. And I know you love that because you love like testing and metrics. So giving something really the breathing room to see if it's a good fit.
Yeah. Now, how do you see curiosity marketing applying like outside of social media? Because I know that, a lot of people listening, there's this really negative sentiment around social media. I feel it too. And so if we want to bring curiosity marketing to other areas, say, our podcasts and our websites, how do we do that in other areas as well outside of social?
I love this question so much. So my number one, I think, especially like if you're a podcaster or a speaker, telling stories is such a beautiful way to build curiosity, both in who you are as a person, like think about those empathizers, but also maybe like a different way that you went about solving a problem or what you're finding interesting in life right now. Like all of those little pieces are great ways to create curiosity in your audience. And starting, I'll share this as a speaker. I don't tend to start my my conversation or my presentation with like, "Hello, I'm Emily Aborn. I'm blah 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 blah." I start with a story. I just jump right in. Like I take them right into the middle of the story and start my conversation that way. And then once I'm done telling my story and kind of like setting up what we're going to be talking about, then I introduce myself and share why that's relevant to the conversation we're having today. So it's things like that, like thinking about how can I just drop them right in my podcast, in my speaking engagements, in networking conversations. How can I introduce myself in a new way that maybe isn't like, I'm a realtor, because everybody knows what that is. And then they're like, okay, nice. Next. When I introduce myself in a networking setting, I like to I'm not like intentionally being elusive. I just realized that this is a great way to get people to ask another question. So instead of saying I'm a copywriter, which actually a lot of people, like a lot of small local businesses don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
But instead of saying that, I just now say I'm a writer. And then people always ask me what I write.
Yeah.
And it's just like a good way to open up the conversation. And it's not, I'm not being deceitful or shisty or any of that. It's just like I'm leaving it more vague so that I can invite another question.
Oh, I'm not sure how I would do that for myself, but I am so curious about this because you're right. Like there's the introduction where we try to get it over as quickly as possible. I'm a copywriter. And then there's sometimes where we try to over-explain it. That's where I am. I'll say that. I try to over-explain it because people don't know. And I'm like, I work in marketing. I work on social media. I play around on TikTok. Like, what is my job? So I'm going to think of a way to do this. If I do, I'm going to have to attribute to you, Emily, and be like, this is because of Emily. Because you're right. There's the same old way of doing it. And then there's the way that will actually connect with people. And sometimes it is that like a bit of unexpectedness. Okay. You got me thinking. So now that we've kind of looked at curiosity marketing, we've defined what it is. What are some of the things we should avoid when we're trying to do curiosity content in our marketing?
Okay, so I have just three. That way it's not overwhelming. And the first is we kind of talked about this a little bit, but not using complex or jargony language. So to your point, let's use a marketer as an example. Like if we get into the weeds and start describing SEO and all of this, like talking over people's head and how we're going to help them get ranked on Google, that's industry jargon. I mean, that's like shop talk, right? So just using plain speech and plain English whatever language you speak, whenever possible. That way you're not kind of talking over people's heads, because when we do, they check out. Like, I don't know if you've ever had anything explained to you around the house that is just like, I don't know. I don't care. I don't
Anything
know.
to do with my car. I have no idea. What is the make and model? You already lost me.
Exactly. Or for me, it's sports too. Like, I'm like, I don't know. So, just speaking really without complex language and your industry jargon and like being aware of what those things are. Along this also, there's a lot of overused words like some that just pop to mind are like authentic or like alignment, just like overused words that don't capture people's attention anymore because they're so overused. And they've kind of, it's sad because some of them are such fantastic words, but they've started to lose their meaning a little. So thinking about what those are, like, is there something else you could say instead of transformational life coach, right? Is there something else you could say instead of alignment? Is there something else you could say? So thinking of those kinds of things too. The next one we did address briefly, but like not giving too many details. And I want to bring this into like, picture like an email newsletter where somebody has shared like 20 things in their email newsletter. Like it's not just one thing, it's like 20 different events. And like they also want you to go to their website. And also if you're interested in listening to their podcast, it's just jam packed with things to do and things that could take you down any one rabbit hole. Most people don't go down any of them. So giving people like just one thing to do, you know, like on this page, my goal is to get people to my about page. In this newsletter, my goal is to get people to listen to my podcast. So giving them one call to action, one really clear action step forward. That is one I definitely used to make the mistake of. Like my newsletter was just like, here's everything that's gone on in the past week. Do you want to know more? Because I could tell you more. But now I just am very, very focused. I always just share like something relevant to my podcast episode and then the podcast episode. So, and then the last one, I think you're going to love this, especially as a podcaster. It's not leading the witness. And what I mean by that is not telling people what we want them to think. So it's so much more engaging for our brain as a human being to kind of leave something as an open question for me to think about, like, ooh, how might this apply to me? You know, or what am I going to do about this? Like leaving them kind of with something to chew on later. So not closing a loop necessarily can also help lead them to the next step. Here's how I do this in my podcast. Well, first of all, I don't like to tell people, like, I don't like to prescribe. So be like, okay, you should do this, 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 and this, and this. But at the end of every episode, I'll queue up next week's episode and be like, okay, next week, if you liked this, like next week, we're going to be taking this a level deeper and getting into XYZ. And it's just like a little way to kind of keep the loop open and not tell them like, you know, there's no period at the end of the sentence. It's kind of like the 3 ellipses, right? Yes. So just little tiny things like that to avoid and be careful of in your content can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking about ways I can do this already because I do think a lot of the work that we do, especially as marketers, so this is to my marketers out there who are listening, we know too much. We know too much. And so we want to go, here's everything neatly packaged up. This is it. This is the end. It's everything you could possibly need to know about this topic. And we're going to do it all right here in this little social media post or in this one email. As humans, we don't want that much information, especially not all at once. It's just too much. And it kind of reminds me of like that you mentioned networking earlier. It kind of reminds me going to the networking event and sitting next to the person who tells you their entire life story. And you're like, I didn't ask for any of this. And I can't ask a follow-up question. Like there's no space here. Yeah. And like, we don't want to be that person. Right. And so basically what you said is like, you know, allow curiosity. And I do think this is powerful. And I also want to say some people may not be curious, right? And I feel like that's okay, right? Like, do you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, we have the avoiders, and that's I think that's actually like 25% of the population are avoiders. So there's literally 25% of people walking around out there, which I'm like, how is this possible? They're just not curious. They don't have a question. They're not looking to solve a problem. So yeah, there are those people too, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up the conversation, I want to know what's the number way you're using curiosity marketing? Like Emily Aborn, how are you using curiosity marketing in your marketing?
I think the number one way is through my podcast. I definitely tell a lot of stories in my podcast and show my personality a lot on my podcast. I think personality is such a great way to create curiosity. And that's where I get to practice also with that previewing where it's like, here's what's coming, or teasing people along and just seeing, that's my testing ground. If I'm honest, like that's where I get to test like what piques people's curiosity. Buzzsprout just added this great new feature if you're hosting on Buzzsprout, where you can text message the host.
What?
And so, yeah, it's amazing.
That's so cool.
So that's another little thing that I'm just like, ooh, let's test this and see if people are curious, what questions people have. So my podcast is my number one way of using curiosity marketing. And it's my curiosity playground, if you will.
I love it. That's a good name for a podcast too, the Curiosity Playground. Putting it out there. I love it. Okay, cool. No, I like curiosity marketing. I think here, I have one. I'll save it for the end. I'll save my one for the end. Before I share my way that I'm using curiosity marketing, I'd love to know more about the bio builder, which for those of you listening, this is a great place to start. If you're like, where do I put my curiosity marketing? It's in your bio. Tell us about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the bio builder is exactly that. It's how to put curiosity into how you talk about yourself. And people love this. This goes to show how interested we are in ourselves. This is like my number one most listened to episode and my number one ever most downloaded anything. So my bio builder, it will help you to ask yourself the questions that are going to like create a little spark of interest when you're talking about yourself, whether it be on your LinkedIn, on your website, in person. So it's just kind of a starting place for you to rewrite, revise, add in things to your bio.
Love it. Okay. I'm going to put this link in the show notes. Y'all can find it at onlinedrea.com/317 and also connect with Emily there. What's the best place they can connect with you? On social, email, podcast? I'm guessing it's the podcast.
Yes, the podcast. You're already listening to a podcast, so it's an easy jump over to the Content with Character podcast. And we have a lot of, I would say, like, I'm an empathizer, so I'm really interested in us as like human beings and how we show up in our content in different ways. So you're going to get a lot of that. But now I want to hear how you are implementing curiosity marketing.
Yes. So I did a little bit there where I was like, ooh, I'm going to say this later.
That was awesome.
And also I can do it now because one of my favorite ways to do curiosity marketing is through Instagram threads, or just threads now, I guess it's called. I like to post questions on threads that are conversations that I may want to have on the podcast or via email or with my community. And so I ask these questions in a public way, and then they lead to other things. I did this recently for our social media day summit where I was like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. What do you think? Now I'm thinking about speakers who should be a speaker. Now I'm thinking about sponsors who should be a sponsor. And it kind of led to the event. And so I love that. And next episode, I'm talking about threads as well. Curiosity in action.
Stay tuned.
I love that. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
It was fun. And thank you, dear listener, for tuning into another episode. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify helps keep us in the top 100 marketing podcasts. It's all because of your support. And truly stay tuned. Next week, we're talking about threads. So we'll do that next week. That's all for now. Bye.